Have a little bit of a repeat, some fun from last night, but I do not like to introduce people. I like for people to introduce themselves, and I also really enjoyed the fact that one thing Felicia taught us, and we got it from Founders Therapy. So, your name, your company, and 2 hashtags to describe yourself. And then after that, we're gonna get right into it, all right? So if you don't mind, ladies first, work it all the way down to the end. I know, go ahead.
I'm Mary Spear with Next Galaxy and 2 hashtags, game changer and awesome.
I'm Jewel Burks with Accelerate with Google and PartPick, and my hashtags are hashtag Accelerate with Google, hashtag PartPick.
Aurelia Cruz with Rocker Labs, hashtag Make You Successful, hashtag You Have Lots of Potential.
John Lewis, the Coca-Cola Company, hashtag Bothered, and hashtag Hopeful.
So as you guys know, I guess I'm followed by a little bit of controversy, so we just gonna jump right into it. Diversity, inclusion. We already know that in terms, the word itself, diversity, comes with a connotation that's not always positive. So if we had to start, we can go the same way. What would be the first way or the new word that we can use to replace diversity when we're tackling the issue of disparity numbers in technology and starting our new business? What is the new word for diversity? Go ahead, Mary. We'll start off with you.
All right. I know you're asking for one word, but
I'm asking for a phrase. You can go to the word.
okay. But I think that it would be like the growth imperative, and I say that because while a lot of people still look at diversity as something that's nice to do, I think that it's a necessity. Because when you look at innovation, innovation comes from it comes from being able to have diverse opinions. And I think because a lot of our perspectives have been missing for such a long time, there is a lot that we're able to bring to the conversation, which is also what is needed in order to be able to innovate, right? If everything is, homogenous, then it leads to stagnation. So for actual growth to occur in any ecosystem, you need a diverse, and so that's why I think that diversity is the change imperative. It's the innovation imperative. It's the growth imperative. That's what really we should be looking at when we talk about diversity today, inclusive.
And I think of that as a key humbling fact, as Mary just happens to not tell too many people, but we're sitting in front of a female rocket scientist. So when you're talking about the greatness that we have in this room, that's one great example right there. She is a rocket scientist. So let's go ahead, Jewel.
So I think my opinion on this is going to be controversial, and I'll give this disclaimer that my opinions are my own. I'm not necessarily giving the opinions of Google right now in this
She
panel.
represents PartPick right now.
I am Jewel with my PartPick hat on now. Okay, so honestly, I think that a lot of times diversity is used as a sweet way to say Black people, when that's what we're talking about, or Hispanic people. We talk around it, and we use diversity as like, let's all be together and have fun. But we're really, the audience that we're talking about is Black people or Hispanic people. And I think we should call it what it is. Yeah, so that's, if we're talking about Black people, then talk about Black people. If we're talking about Hispanics, if we're talking about groups who have historically been oppressed or underserved, just call it what it is. That's what it is. So that's kind of what I call it and what I say.
Go ahead.
Wow, okay. We'll come after that. Okay. I'll take, I agree with both the women that spoke before me, but I'll add that I really do like the word inclusion. When I was at Cisco, they changed from being diversity to inclusion, using inclusive or inclusion as part of their HR strategy. And I like the word because it goes beyond just race. It goes beyond just gender. It goes beyond just your sexual orientation. it means that you as an individual can sit there and have the same conversations as that other person, whatever that other person is. Because as we know, we can have our own companies and still not include people because of certain way they dressed or the certain way they talk or what have you. So not only is it beyond just our racial identification, it's also who we are as a person needs to be included. So I like the inclusion word for diversity.
I'll agree first with Jewel. To the extent that I didn't say it, certainly my views are my own. They don't necessarily reflect those of the Coca-Cola company, its bottlers, affiliates, partners, shareholders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When I became the chief, my work started in diversity extracurricularly as a lawyer for the company, developing supplier diversity programs, trying to do more work with minority and women-owned law firms, really from my own vantage point as a black man, trying to create space and create visibility and create opportunities where I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me doing the work I was doing. A more broadened view of that as the chief diversity officer of the company now really sort of speaks to a couple of concepts. The first concept is cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence really speaks to that broadened basket of skill sets that we all need to develop to remain relevant in a new global sort of different economy than the one that our parents and grandparents experienced. Really a different paradigm. The second concept is really about leveraging and harnessing an opportunity, because again, I remember law firms when I was in the legal space, they would kind of conflate diversity and philanthropy and community engagement. Diversity was the same thing as building a habitat house. The truth of the matter is what diversity and what inclusion and whatever it is we give it, what it's about is about those who have been traditionally left behind, the marginalized, the institutionally forgotten, and really all we tend to lose as a society by not bringing them into the marketplace of ideas. What we lose by not having those folks participate meaningfully in the economy. Maybe the only brain that has been delivered to this world to solve some intractable problem has only been delivered to a poor kid in the projects. Maybe that brain's only been delivered to a gay kid in India. Maybe that brain's only been delivered to a woman, but it's a world that is, or it's a profession that is dominated by men. A more broadened view is less about, it's important to treat people right and to be nice to people, but this is really about an untapped opportunity for us as a business community, an untapped opportunity for us as a country, as a world. And if we don't access that opportunity, it's the world that loses. It's not the sort of disadvantaged person. It's the world that loses.
Church. I think when you go directly into that, one of our hashtags is We Are Tech, and we focus on minority, women, and LGBT. So you actually just covered all three, which was pretty amazing. And we know that the head start is real. You can try to ignore what has happened in the past, but we know what has happened. So with that head start, I know right now there's some people that would miss work to watch House of Cards. And they would sit there the whole day to watch House of Cards. But right now we can't get people to buy tickets in their own backyard to support the efforts that they claim they don't get or the opportunities. How do we create our own headlines? And how do we bring people to these facilities when they keep saying we're not given the opportunity?
Right. I think there are a lot of structural issues, like say within the community, and one of it being the type of coverage, right, that we get in terms of even as it relates to tech. When it comes to the black media, if you will, this is Black Tech Week, right? So when you look at the coverage within in terms of technology, it's not there. I think that the priorities in terms of where the priorities are placed, right, they're with the celebrities, an example being when Hopstop was acquired by Apple, that was, Chinedu Uchuru, the founder. I could count on one hand the number of outlets that actually covered it. However, when the Apple acquisition happened with Beats, with Hopstop, it was estimated to be $1 billion. So it was, very comparable. But it was everywhere with Beats. One, because it was Dr. Dre. And you see a lot of coverage on MC Hammer investing in tech. He's invested in a company called WeDo. I'm not sure what they do, but that's what it is. And it's everywhere. I've been in Wired and Forbes and this and that, but it's hard to get Essence or Ebony to cover. And a lot of times they go, oh, well, we're not really into tech. We're all techies. If you're texting, if you've ever texted, if you've ever, we're all techies today. It's the new economy. So in order to show these new images of possibility, it has to start there. And if it's not happening there, we have to drive that initiative. We have to continue to drive that initiative for every one of us that has access to social media. We've seen regimes toppled in other places. There's no reason why we couldn't drive that same initiative of covering each other and covering others. So I think it starts within those type of things, and then there are other things too. But
Anybody else want to piggyback off that?
Yeah, I think for me, and I know we had this headline discussion, I learned the concept of a headline when I worked at Microsoft. Microsoft was a very big company internally where they wanted their individual employees to have the headlines. And I just wasn't a headline person. I'm like, if I do a good job, you guys will know it, and then we'll keep it moving. It doesn't work that way, and it definitely does not work that way for people of color. So we need to create our own individual headlines and then help another person make their headlines, and then keep going and keep going. Social media has been a great tool with that, but it's also something that we read. We need to be active in making those headlines. It's not about the press, it's not about all of that. It's about calling someone and say, you better show up at Black Tech Week, and making them accountable, and making those kind of headlines about, and telling people what the information you learned. That's the kind of things that you have to do, and you have to do it on your job every day. You have to do it out in your community. Those are headlines. So if the media won't get it, we'll take it to ourselves and be personal people to go out there and spread headlines.
Now to jump right on that, for the Fortune 100s that are sitting here, we know, or at least I would say our local South Florida people would know, we had Coca-Cola, and if we had Google, east of 95, the results and the coverage would have been totally different. So when we run into problems where they say they want to make a change and they won't implement back into the communities that yet they want to change, how do we fire start that? And how does that look from a Fortune 100 company to know 20 times more people and 20 times more press would have been given if you just would have been east of 95?
Well, I'll just speak for kind of me and my role at Google is to understand that and tell it back and say, I am on the ground trying to figure out why is that, and tell that story back to Google so that we can at least influence it in our little way. So I feel super fortunate, and will sing Google's praises all day because this opportunity to be here and to speak to people and understand what's really going on. What are the problems? From our kind of glass house view, we might not understand that east of 95, I'm not from here, so I don't really know what that means. But now I'm going to know, and I'm going to be able to say, okay, this event was east of 95, so we need to figure something out about east of 95. I don't know, but I think that's the piece. Like, we have to understand the dynamics in these specific communities and tell that story back and say, hey, something's going on here. Let's figure it out.
But I think even with the East of 95, I mean, Mary, I went to your summit, which was excellent, but I still think there could have been 200 more people at your conference, and it was East of 95. The big summit, it was last month. It was incredible. So I don't even know if the location is necessarily always the driver, because it was right there in South Beach.
Well, I honestly didn't want to say it was just the location, but is it becoming more obvious? Do they fear the power that we may have, or do they fear what we may do when we have the power?
Who is they?
Right.
I would say, I don't want to say that word.
Say it.
Well, you know me. I would say the world of almost, not really the oppressors, but the ones that are in their bubbles that don't invite others in. Now, granted, we may infiltrate their bubble, but Mary was as deep in the bubble as she could get. She was on South Beach. You were right there. You had Emerge, you had everybody supporting it, and I'm publicly speaking, but I remember seeing 200 to 300 more badges on the table. The badges were there. They paid and they've said, I'm going to support you, but they just didn't show up. So, Mr. Lewis, I know I can see it on your tongue. Go ahead.
Well, we can certainly talk about what folks not in the room have or have not done to support us and our causes. But I think we have to, in intellectual honesty, also talk about what we do and don't do to support each other. And there is an accountability that this work requires that we have largely not really leveraged as folks. We, for whatever reasons, and I'm not a social scientist or historian, but for whatever reasons, we have been conditioned not to support and not to bet on each other. We have not. And as a consequence, we have not really gained the opportunity that we could have gained. I mean, guys, consider it. And this is not diversity data. This is Nielsen data. This is demographer data. That African American spending power in this country, if aggregated, is a $1.1 trillion economy. That would make African Americans, if we were a standalone country, one of the 15 largest nations by GDP in the world. Who tells that story? And who holds the marketplace accountable for not speaking to, recognizing, and leveraging and marketing to us as a constituency? Similarly, the LGBT community, $830 or so billion economy. So as we talk about moral arguments, as we talk about the emergent Latino community, which is going to be the dominant demographic in this country, until we mobilize in a way that flexes economic and political clout, I guess I'm sort of taken back to the words that Frederick Douglass uttered over 150 years ago that, guys, power concedes nothing without a struggle. It never did and it never will. So if we're waiting for people who have benefited from sort of the status quo to, out of altruism or by some other motivation, to just wake up one day and change, it's not going to happen. The change starts organically with us, and it starts with us starting to look inward and starting to recognize and leverage and celebrate each other.
Go ahead.
Right, I would definitely like to add to that. I think that the change starts organically and not betting on each other.
Mics.
Okay, my mic off. Hello? Thank you. Right, I think not betting on each other, that is, I could really relate to that, right? I've been, and going back to me, I've been in a business for 11 years now, launched 3 different tech companies, all game changers, had to raise capital several times. And in my 11-year experience, I don't have one black investor, not one. Not one. So I think that there is this issue of not betting on each other, right? And which kind of, if you look at, for example, Y Combinator, the reason why they're so successful, there is that process in engineering called thermal runaway, which is when a condition changes in such a way that it causes an increase in temperature, which causes it to keep increasing until there is like an explosion, which is what's happened with organizations like Y Combinator. You have one successful company like, Airbnb or whatever that comes out of it, and then they pay it forward and they continue to bet on each other. So if I'm Reddit and I'm coming out of there, I already have a billion-dollar audience to kind of kick off of, right? So having the ability to kind of bet each other, I just read that the 50 wealthiest black male celebrities have a net worth of $7 billion. $7 billion. It's not that we don't invest. They invest in, everybody's got a liquor brand, right? Everybody's got a clothing line. Everybody's got another barbershop. Everybody's got you know. So I think that the type of things that we're investing in, and you know, until we kind of start to look around and say, well, we're going to invest in our communities. You know, and a lot of people talk about generational wealth, and it's not there. But they're crowdfund. But what about the $7 billion? That could be, you know, invested.
That is your crowdfunding.
Right, and then crowdfunding. I don't know how many people in here have invested in a company on crowdfund, right? It could be $5, it could be $50, but it makes all the change in the world, because when people bet on you, then other people bet on you. Oculus, which was recently acquired by Facebook for $2 billion. I mean, the types of people that bet on his project, right? This was a kid from Irvine. So that also communicated to the larger market that there is something here. Is it the best technology? Possibly. But, you know, so betting on each other and leveraging all this social capital and whatnot that we already have, individually and then collectively, is, you know, what's going to start that process.
And I mean, to slightly switch gears, I think you talk about the double mantra. Now we're talking about not just the race. We talk about how many women are leaving technology because they feel the odds are double up against the man. Purposely and strategically, I made sure I had 3 women on the stage. So I want to know, for you ladies to be in that position, how do you now feel? Because it's one thing to be a person of color, but now it's another thing to be a woman of color in technology. How's that struggle been?
You want to go?
Let me talk about it. No, so it's hard. That's, I mean, point blank period. There's no way to get around that. It's very difficult to be in a male-dominated industry, one, in a white male-dominated industry, and being the exact opposite, you know, on paper of that. However, it is added motivation as well, because, you know, every day, all day, I'm trying to prove something, right? I have something to prove. I have a chip on my shoulder. More so in kind of this tech early stage startup fundraising game that I'm in with PartPick, I've had people, VCs, say to me, if you were a white male, you would have raised $10 million already. Like, that has come out of multiple people's mouths. And that's like, well, I can't, that can't happen for me. So, I mean, what am I supposed to do? So yeah, it's tough, but it's not a non-starter. It's, you know, I just got to work around it. You got to figure it out. I'm a little ant. I'm gonna get around it, right? So, you know, it is what it is, and it's unfortunate. And your point about the fact that you've raised money and not had any black investors, that's also a piece of it. We have to, I mean, we have to invest in ourselves. Right. There's this one point that I've been battling with, which is some of our civil rights leaders have entered into the diversity in tech discussion, and their parade has been, we need board seats.
Be careful, John hangs out with Jesse Jackson. I just want you to know.
Hey, I will tell him, I've been at Rainbow Push events, I will tell him to his face.
As will I.
So the idea of saying now we need board seats in Google and Apple, that doesn't really hold water, because the people who have board seats at Google and Apple invested early in Google and Apple. And so if you want a board seat, invest. Point blank period.
I agree. And go ahead.
Well, just echoing on that whole women of color and black women in technology. In 1999, when I was hired at Cisco, I was the first African-American woman outside salesperson they had ever hired in the entire company. My badge number was 55965. So that means there was 55964 or whatever before me that had been hired in that company in 1999 when the stock was out of the roof. So, you know, even though that sounds like a long time ago, it really was not a long time ago. And so it is difficult at times to be a black woman in technology. I've gotten out of the corporate, traditional corporate game, and now I'm at Rocker Labs, where I love it because I can use all my creativity and all the things that I want to do for my people, for myself, for my community, and I get creative with it because I help people build their dreams. So sometimes when you feel as though as a woman or whoever you are, that you're not getting what you want, shift gears and start doing it. Start doing what you want to do to get what you want.
Right.
And I love what Jewel had to say, because it speaks to sort of this whole idea that there's no one right path. There is a traditional civil rights mindset that may be well at odds with how you young people believe the path forward should be carved. And that is a legitimate. Remember, another iteration of diversity is generational diversity. And what we tell our colleagues is that there are 4 generations of employees in the workforce in our company now. Think of grandparents working in the same spaces with their grandkids. And the truth of the matter is, different orientations, different life experiences, different perspectives lead to different ways of thinking about and addressing problems. And I think the diversity dialogue is suffering from a bit of that now. But it also speaks to our internal diversity. I mean, there is no African American agenda. There is no Latino agenda. My Latino colleagues remind me that Peruvians are different from Venezuelans, or different from Chileans, or different from Mexicans, or different from Puerto Ricans. So to talk in monolithic terms about Asians or even black people probably misses the boat to some extent. And to talk about Jesse Jackson age black people in the same sentence as Jewel age black people probably misses some of the context as well. So we got to be fearless about having those conversations.
As far as my experience as a black woman being in tech, while I was working for Boeing, actually Boeing was one of the places where I never really even thought about it, because the environment set was just very inclusive. I was one of 3 engineers that was hired to work on a specific project. They built a whole company out of that, which became Digital Cinema, and then we grew. But as we grew, I never really felt my race as an issue ever, right? But it was visible. I was the only woman many times. I was only African American also many times, but it wasn't something that, I think there were a lot of efforts within the organization to try and be more inclusive, and it was never an issue. I've been at 1 or 2 places also where it was different. When I launched my company in Raising Capital, I had one investor say to me, "We need to have a young white male who show me the black Mark Zuckerberg," and proceeded to kick me out of my company and put a young 23-year-old at the helm of my company. But I'm now also in a position where I have 2 funds that have gotten behind my company that traditionally don't do, companies in the stage that I'm in, which is kind of in that Series A stage, that are now going to fund my company. So I think that it's been, if I look at the sum of all things, it's been more positive than it's been negative. And so I can't really let, discrete instances that I can count on one hand kind of define what my experience has been. If I had to grade it, it would be more 85%. It's been great. I've had to work as hard as everybody else, so that's been my experience.
And I think to go into that, it wouldn't be the essence of Digital Grass and Black Tech Week if we didn't go into, of course, your closing with a positive. So we know the struggle, and we understand it, but I think hearing other people's experiences and their views helps. But now it's the next frontier. It's that next step. So if you had to give maybe a sentence or 2, because I want to make sure we get some questions if there are any. If you had to give a sentence or 2 of what you want this crowd to take away as what's the next step for this inclusion process, what would you want to say to them?
I think it starts with us. And one thing that I always share is when you share your light, you live in a brighter world. So not looking at, if you're the only person in there, not looking at the pie as getting smaller if you help other people get in there, but rather that the more you share, the bigger the pie gets for everyone. So share your light, share your contacts, share whatever you can, your resources to help others. So that's one way to start.
I like that. The thing that has continued to motivate me. I said earlier I have a chip on my shoulder. That's true. But it's also true that I understand that it's much bigger than me. And yes, it's hard for me. Yes, I have nights where I don't sleep, or I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work because I am who I am and I can't change it. And it seems like that's really a barrier. It seems like that some days. But then there are days where I, am walking around Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and a kid comes up to me, a freshman student says, hey, I saw you on Small Empires, the show that Alexis Ohanian did on your company, and now I have the, inspiration to start my own company, and I want to do what you're doing. How did you get started? When, there's two young ladies who came up to me at Essence Fest last year, and I was hosting a panel of like YouTube celebrities. And they came up to me after the panel and said, how did you get at Google? And to me, I was like, you don't want to go talk to Cheska Lee? She's hot. But, that was something that opened my eyes and say, okay, this work matters. It's important. And so that's kind of the thing where we're sharing our stories, we're sharing our struggles, but there's someone who's being inspired by it. And that's what continues to motivate me. And I'd say the more I talk about it, the more people are saying, okay, now I understand at least what the first couple steps are, and I want to do what you're doing. So to me, that makes it worth it.
I'll echo that. I think being a mentor to others is just key. I mean, I'm not here by myself. And I think that's really the most important thing. When you have made it, help others that are struggling or trying to make it in the same place. Often that we make it and we look back like, I made it, but I'm good now. We need everyone to make it. So I think the mentoring part, one of the things I did at some of my previous jobs is I would make my company sponsor children events about technology. I would try to get funds for letting youth know about technology because I didn't like technology as a child because no one came and talked to me about how cool it could be. So these kind of events or other ways that you can mentor children, the next generation, that is what I think is very important to do because we have to get more people like us out there and be successful.
Last fall, I was invited to speak at a diversity conference in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And probably, if you are not familiar with sort of where Brazil is in its sort of racial sort of equality story, Brazil was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery. It abolished slavery in 1880. And there are 14 million people of African descent who now are native Brazilians, 14 million black people. And they are literally, in every metric that matters, at the bottom of the well, at the bottom of the food chain. Literacy, economic opportunities, there are multinational companies with presences in Brazil that have no people of African descent represented. And so Brazil's sort of at an inflection point. It is sort of 1950s America in Brazil right now in terms of the racial rhetoric. And I was the only American on this panel discussion like this, and I had a question from the audience translated into Portuguese from Portuguese into my ear, and it was essentially, can you tell us how you solved all this in America? And to the great disappointment of Brazilians, I shared with them that, of course, this year marks the 50th year of the passage of the Civil Rights Act. It is the 150th year of the abolition of chattel slavery in this country. And I had the unhappy task of reporting to the Brazilians that we're still not there. We are still not there. But we have made progress, and the rest of the world watches us with some admiration for our grit and our determination and our tenacity and our efforts to make progress every generation. I guess what you've heard here is that the struggle is sort of an endemic part of who we are, folks. It's an endemic part of who your grandparents were as they integrated places, as they quietly marched. The movie Selma kind of reminded me of that. You know, famous people that we know, but there are a lot of people whose names we'll never know. who broke ground. So here's your ground to break. And the good news is you're not going to get hit by a rock or a stick, at least hopefully you won't. You're not going to be spat upon or thrown in jail, but the truth is you're here in this room today because this is the path less traveled. This is the place where a lot of people aren't going to want to go. But to advance the ball, to advance the cause, this is the place where we lean in. Any person who is of color, who is successful in any aspect of life, is going to have a Jackie Robinson story. I have my own from law firms I was in as a young lawyer, places where we were the first, places where nobody expected us to be, places where they asked, well, where's the white guy? We'll all have those stories, and we can be victimized by them, or we can use them as other cultures have. We can be motivated by them. We can be inspired by them. We can use them as a battle cry to go out and do what it is we need to do to be successful. And that's what, candidly, the people who bled on bridges and in jails will expect for you to do. So, yeah, it'll be rough some days. If it's not rough, you're not doing it right. But kind of lean in, take a breath, go relax, and then go back at it the next day. You'll get there. You're too brilliant, you're too prepared, you're too well-educated, you're too motivated not to be successful. The only thing that will make you not successful is your own head.
Well, so we got a little bit of time for a couple of questions, and I don't want to make you go. Stand up. Go ahead. Tell me what it is. I agree, thank you. And I'm not going to do this. Y'all know how I roll. Ask a question. I want a question. Go ahead, Robert. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joyce Brown. I am an intellectual property lawyer, but prior to that, I was an engineer. I worked for Applied Materials in Austin, Texas. I graduated from college with great grades, and I went into tech. We're talking about diversity and inclusion, and one thing that I have noticed in general, and this is, I do have a question. I just want to.
Because you're running on time. Ask the question. Let's leave the store. Let's go.
Okay, no problem. The question is this. You know, as women, we can say that yes, we want diversity and inclusion, and we can say that there's an issue with that. But as a woman, if you can provide some degree of feedback for the people in the audience, what have you done as an individual to encourage that, to promote that for yourself, but more importantly, to counsel the next person as far as what they can do to enforce upon that? Because we've all experienced it on some level. I experienced it in tech. I experienced it as a lawyer.
So we're looking at the support. So one person can take that for me?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and address that. Okay. Right. Because of not, having that, what I've done is I work with a lot of different organizations. I actually currently work with the United States, the Department of State, in supporting exactly those type of initiatives. I've traveled to over 10 different countries to talk specifically about that to a diverse group of people, not just African Americans, but also even just women across the board, Pakistan, Ukraine, all over. So it's something that, and it's not something that I necessarily have the time to do or want to dedicate my funds to doing, but it's something that I do because I believe is very important. And I see the result of that too with the emails that I get on a daily basis of people that are going into tech because they might have seen an article somewhere or heard me speak somewhere. In my own instance, when I went to Syracuse for my undergraduate program, because I'd never seen a computer up until I was like 17, I was ready to drop out. And I went to the dean of engineering to let them know I was going to go into psychology, which is what I ended up minoring in. And she happened to be an African-American woman. And she took me under her wing mentored me. She was also, not only was she the dean of engineering, but it occurred to me then I had, somebody that I was looking into a mirror that if she could do it, I could do it too. And I ended up graduating #1 in my class. So I do the same thing to pay
Point of
it forward.
reflection, they're doing it right now because we probably got about $2,000 worth of billable hours sitting up here. So they're doing it by being here, but it is going to be from mentoring. Got another question? Go ahead.
Mike Felix, I'll make this quick. I've been a part of a lot of diversity and inclusion discussions within corporations like Lockheed Martin, NASA, Department of Defense. And one question that I still have not gotten an answer to is, on paper, when you look at diversity within a corporation, what does a diversity profile look like? At what point do you look at the metrics and say, we as a corporation are diverse?
So for Google, what we're striving for is for our company to look like our users. And so you can slice that however you want to, but the idea is that we can build better products if the people building them look like our users. So that's our kind of metric that we're striving for, is for the people who are inside of Google to reflect the people who are outside of Google.
Yep, we're a consumer brand company, and that's exactly right. Simply put, we should look as an organization like our consumer base. We should. And our consumer base is the world. And I told you that what the African American population looks like as an economy, where the largest economy in the whole world is American women. So if we do not reflect American women in our workforce, and not just at the low levels, but all through, and that's really what the board piece is about, at all levels of a company, if we don't reflect that, then we are not fairly representative of the consumer base that we purport to serve. And because we are not optimizing the opportunity in the marketplace. Look, guys, nobody cares. I mean, nobody cares. We're beyond the point where we can continue to sort of make this a moral imperative. People either get that or they don't. But what people do get is money. And people understand that there's an economic imperative to do this work, then it'll get done. I still think there's still some work to be done connecting heart to head on whether people get intellectually what the opportunity is, and that they acknowledge all the unconscious biases that create a disconnect between what they know empirically to be true and what they know in their head and heart to be the right answer. So, but that's the goal. And do we look like that today? No.
We're going to take 2 more questions. Hold on. Got one over here. Go ahead.
I think you just need to, contact us. But I think the most important thing about that is we always say, okay, call me, let's get together. But hold us accountable. Because at the end of the day, we do get busy and we have good intentions, but hold us accountable too. Because I definitely would love to work with kids and mentor them, but I do get busy. So contact me directly. I'll extend that to you.
Just real quick, I think it all boils down to relationships. I met Michael at an Amplify for Good event in Atlanta, and I met the guy who runs Amplify for Good because he held me down when I first moved to Atlanta and brought me into the scene. And so I'm helping him with his organization because of a relationship. So, more than just, I met you at this event, I need your help, I need you to fund this thing that I'm working on. It's about relationships.
I was about to say the trick of a trade. I remember the first lady I met that I made a big deal with had nothing to do with business. I complimented her on her David Yurman pieces because she was from New York, and that's when she was willing to talk to me. So everything is about a strategy. If you don't have a strategy, you're already losing. Right. So it's like I heard in the back with this great conversation between John and Delane. you got to have the swagger, not just the tech. So you got to know how to sell yourself first. So it's about relationships. It's not always about your product. Because some people will invest in a failing product, but they will believe in you. Because they'll believe that you can create something different. I'm going to take one more. Okay. We got enough time. We're just going to lose the break.
Unless you are trying to keep where.
Yeah, we're going to lose the break. So I'm going to go to John, and then I'm going to come over here.
Right, I think diversifying who's making the investments, or who's making the decision regarding whether it's contracts or whatever you have, is going to make a big impact. Because at the end of the day, for businesses, no matter who you are, people do business with people they know, people they trust, or people they like. Right, and so networking, you're going to find somebody who likes somebody. But I heard the founder of Twitter, Buzz. One of the co-founders talk about the fact that he followed one of the other guys, and and you hear a lot of those stories because that he brought him into Google actually, and that's one of the things that happen. Who's vouching for you, or who are you going to be able to meet that is going to be able to kind of click with you? So I think as we get more diverse, you're going to have people that have an understanding of what you're trying to do, whether it's another woman that's at the table, or so just as VCs get more diverse or have more of the entrepreneurial background, and I think things like what we're doing today is really going to bring the attention to it and let more people say, hey, you know what, maybe I'll look at a tech company that's being run by another Black person and see, or I'll go on Kickstarter or crowdfund and support someone. So it just will increase where we're going. But things are getting better across the board, I think.
It got to be short. I'm going to take the last question, and I got to wrap it up. We've already ran over our time. Go ahead, in the back. Just the question. Let's go. I would say the biggest thing is educating for different opportunities to diversify your own portfolio and to realize how effectively you can change another generation. So it is an education and awareness process, because we have to educate the baby boomers of these opportunities. So it's exposure. They got to be willing to come. Cool kids, we drink beer and we hang out. You got to be willing to go where the cool kids go. And it's awkward, but that's what they do. All right, exactly. You already made the first step. So it's about exposure. And I know we're over time. It's a tradition. This is the last thing I do at every one of my panels. I need one word from each of you. We're going to start with John. Just one word to describe your emotions or your feelings from this panel, or how you feel about today. Just one word.
Hopeful.
Before I say mine, I want to thank Nancy, who is a woman that reports on us
Yes.
in the Miami Herald. And it's related to my word, headlines.
Optimistic.
Excited.
So, as we close out, we all should leave in a more hopeful state, that the headlines of our generation will change to be more positive and optimistic with our views. So when you take this excitement into your day, remember, you are the difference. You were here at the first We Are Black Tech Week. You can make the change that we're looking for. Thank you.